All right, so we've got this thing running. This is officially been named Wonky by Jackson, who is running camera for me today, so he can't be in this portion of it to participate, but he is going to be doing some stuff a little later on. This week, we're going to be talking gas tanks, availability, and cost, and ways to possibly get around some of that. There's going to be times when I'm going to want a brand new tank, but on a car like this, not necessarily. So, we're going to head out and talk about what we've got going on here.
For 45 years, the Miller family and the dedicated staff at Autocrafters have been here helping you to restore your dream Ford. Thank you for your support. Here's to another 45 years of delivering parts for your Falcon, Fairlane, F100, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto.
Now, one of the problems you run into when you're working on a car like Wonky, which is a 66 Falcon, you're going to have a gas tank issue probably, because those cars tend to, when you buy them for the kind of money we bought them for, they tend to sit around for a little bit, and that can really wreak havoc on a gas tank. If you leave an ethanol-based fuel, which a lot of people don't realize you shouldn't run an ethanol-based fuel in a classic car, you leave that stuff in there and it's going to just really wreak havoc, because it's going to pull a lot of moisture in there because of the alcohol from the ethanol in the gasoline. If I said that wrong, I do apologize, but that's basically, you're getting the idea. This tank that we have before us is actually a tank that we got from a friend of ours locally who has a 68 and just finally bit the bullet and bought one from Autocrafters to put in his car, because this one had more rust in it than he wanted to deal with. I'm going to go ahead and try to deal with this. I'm going to do some things today. I'm going to talk about a couple things that you can do. I've heard of a couple different solutions, but the one I kept coming back to was a product we're going to go over here in just a second. But when you have a tank like this, investigate it inside and out. Now, what I'm showing you is a couple of the photographs that we have from the tank that's already on his car outside. Jackson's car has a tank in it. It's got dents in it, which that's one thing that kind of goes against it in my book, because you don't know what that's done to the inside structure of the tank. There may be a small split that you can't see. The other big problem with things like that is rust on the inside of the tank and on the outside of the tank. I've actually seen some of these tanks rust from the outside in. It just starts ballooning that rust. It goes in and it makes a small hole in the tank. The previous owner was running this thing off of a gas can like we are. There was actually a gas can in the engine bay. Leads me to believe that there was a problem with the gas tank, and he was probably either planning on replacing the gas tank or possibly just trying to clean that one up and go with it, putting a lot of fuel filters in between, you know, the fuel line and the actual pump itself. What I'm showing you right now is the inside of this tank that we picked up from my friend with the 68. This tank is in relatively beautiful condition on the outside. It'll look really nice up under Wonky. Matter of fact, it's probably prettier than Wonky, actually, on the outside. It does look better than Wonky, because it's not got a lot of dents in it like Wonky does. But the inside of this tank, if you're looking right now, the shot I'm showing you here is of the tank. In the driver or passenger side of the tank, there's a pile of rust particulate up in that corner. That's problematic. If you have rust particulate, you're going to have a lot of problems with the rust actually getting on your fuel sock if you put a fuel sock in there, and you should. You're going to get particulate on the sock, it's going to clog it, and then the thing will stop running out in the field somewhere. What you really want to try to do is, if you're going to leave it the way it is and not mess with it, is get a really high intensity magnet and put it somewhere near where the fuel pickup is. Usually on these tanks, the fuel pickup is in this low spot in the tank. This is your last desperate chance to get fuel when you're driving a classic car. On a 6-cylinder, you got maybe 4 miles. On a V8, another 75, 85 feet. But that spot right there is what you're actually going to have that sock sitting in, and you'll want to put the magnet off center of that sock to pick up that rust particulate so it doesn't get on the fuel sock. A really high strength magnet is going to be your best bet. The only thing I can say is that may possibly be detrimental to your fuel level, your sender that's in there, because that's usually on a steel rod going down to a brass float like I'm showing you right here. This is one from the guys at Autocrafters, which we will be getting eventually for this tank to put it back in Wonky, or put this one in Wonky. So if I want to not have to deal with putting a bunch of magnets on the bottom of my tank, what should I do? Well, I am going to use this product right here. I'm going to be using Evaporust, and I'm going to use this not because I have any tie to Evaporust whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I spent about $60 getting enough Evaporust for a tank the size that this one is. I think this is like a 17-gallon tank. So I bought 4 gallons of this. I have 3.5 left because I used some of it on some other stuff that I'm working on off camera. But there you go. This is what most of the guys that I've looked at who do a lot of tank restoration, especially in the bike community, motorcycle guys use the Evaporust quite a bit to clean the inside of the tanks out. Now, I'll go over when we get a little closer to it happening of whether or not I want to seal up the inside of this tank. In theory, the Evaporust should take care of everything that we would have a problem with. As long as Jackson doesn't keep this thing low on fuel, we should be good to go. But there is a process that you're going to have to go through whenever you're doing something like the Evaporust to clean it out. You'll notice when you're looking at some of the video I'm showing you right now that the real problem on these tanks are the sides on the inside, the roof of the tank, and not so much the floor, because that's usually got enough gas in it. And people keep about 1/4 of a tank or a little less of gas in the car almost all the time. So if you're running ethanol fuels in there, because people don't realize that that stuff is basically corn-based, which turns into an alcohol type deal, you're going to end up with the tank having the sides being pretty rusty, but the actual base part of the tank is really pretty clean. The Evaporust supposedly will eliminate all rust in the tank, and you need to leave it in there for a little bit. Usually 24 to 48 hours is about max on it. I usually will only leave stuff like this in there about 24 hours. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the whys and wheres on the tank itself. Now, the reason that we are doing what we're doing is Jackson is on a budget. That's the main reason. Normally, I would like to replace a tank. And if you're dealing with a Mustang, Camaro, even the Chevelles, the prices on the tanks are fairly reasonable compared to what they cost for something like a 1966 Falcon gas tank. This tank is fairly expensive because there aren't many of them being made. So you're looking at something in the range of $350 for this tank as opposed to a Mustang gas tank, which is probably in the range of $200 or less. So there you go. That's the main reason why we're doing a restoration on this one. And a lot of you guys are going to run into the same problems. It's not going to be something that's that unusual. But I did want to point out, because somebody is going to leave a comment in the section below that says, hey, why don't you just buy a brand new tank? They're not that much money. They are for tanks like this, and I'll show you why. It looks a lot like a Mustang tank until you flip it up and you see that the filler neck is not at the bottom of the tank. It's actually up here at the top and in the corner. So there you go. That's the main reason we're going to go ahead and rework this tank so that we don't have to spend the money for the more expensive tank. It's not that we don't want to, we do, but we found this one cheaper and we're going to use it. All right, so now what are we going to do with the Evaporust in this tank? We're going to put about 4 gallons in here, which is quite heavy. But what I want to do with that is let it sit. So we'll need something to cap the inlet on the top of the tank, on the top side of the tank right here. So we're buying a cap. Unfortunately, locally, you can't get a cap like at the home improvement centers to do this. You're going to have to probably get it off of Amazon. I'll show you a link to what I'm using right here. And then we've got a fuel sender that's going to be going in the main hole there right here. Then whenever we get that ready to go, we're going to set the tank probably on its back so it's like this. We'll set the tank like this, and then we'll let it sit like that for probably a day. Then we're going to take the tank and we're going to set it up on its end like this for about a day. Then we're going to take the tank and we're going to set it on this end for about a day. And then finally, we're going to take and set the tank on its end like this for about a day. Finally, we take the tank and we set it on its face for about a day. With about 4 gallons of with about 4 gallons of the Evaporust in there, you should get good coverage. And what you'll want to do is to set it up on something so that it's sitting pretty much level, and it should be good to go. The nice thing about the Evaporust is it's not got anything in it like acids or anything like that. It's basically very friendly to the environment. You can reuse it, so once we get through with it in here, we'll pour it out into a big 5-gallon bucket, let all the residual that's in there settle to the bottom, and then we'll pour the stuff off on the top and then dispose of the rest of it in one of our empty Evaporust cans. And then we can reuse that on another project. Like for instance, I've got a motorcycle I'm working on for my stepdaughter that has a bad tank in it, and we need to do the same thing with it. So we'll take some of that Evaporust, put it in there.
So what you're going to want to do is have an impact extension as well as a claw hammer, but you don't want to like beat it to death. And what you're going to do is you're going to bang on the bigger end so you have more surface area to hit. And you're going to put this in right here on one of the tabs that are surrounding it. Oh. What you're wanting to do is there's a little gap where the hooks, like little spacers on the hooks, that it'll slide right on through. Oh, that is really rusty. Fortunately, we're only going to be using this for a hole plug. Yeah. This is awful.
All right, now what I've done here is I've taken my shop vac, which the hoses on those are too big to really get down inside of the tank, and I've bought some heater hose and attached it with some duct tape because, you know, duct tape is the solver of all problems. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to dive down inside the tank, but I want to talk real quickly about what I've done here. This is all the stuff that you're going to need to put it back together. You'll notice I've cut off all the extraneous doodads. I've put a cap on both ends of the fuel line. This is an old Mustang fuel sender, just modified it for the purpose. And this will go back on once we get through with this, and I'll show you the other way I cap this stuff off in just a sec. I'm hoping that the Evaporust will pull most of that out of the tank. I'm also going to put a magnet on the bottom of the tank off center after we get everything done for a little while, just to see where we get with that kind of rust. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on. And it's the same process as taking it off. I got a new O-ring from the guys at Autocrafters. There's a little declivity in the perimeter that you stick it down in. This is the inner portion of it. You'll notice that it's got 2 cleats on either side of it. There we go. And then your cleat goes in into the points. I'm not beating on this really tough, really hard. Good enough right there. More tap just to make it so. All right, I've done that to get as much of that down in that bottom corner. I'm going to try one more shot at getting some of that particulate out from the top side. There we go. Once more. All right, off camera, I'm going to do that a few more times because I am getting a pretty good bit of rust particulate coming down. They say with the Evaporust that you should clean off any loose rust from the surface. There's 2 ways you can do this. You can do what we've been doing, which is to take a hammer like this one and use the back of the hammer, the wooden portion of the hammer, or a leather mallet or even a rubber mallet. But I find that wood is good because it's not going to damage these older, thicker steel tanks, but it's going to create the shock you need to break that particulate loose and have it drop off. I'm going to hit it a couple more times off camera, and then we're going to move on to what we're going to be doing with the rest of this. Let's go! All right, I'm going to pour off the first gallon. I've got a funnel, which means I'll probably miss that as well. But you're just going to pour it in there. And I've got 3 gallons of this stuff and about a half a gallon from some other things that I've been working on. Two of my gallons really aren't clean because I was using it to do some stuff on the Galaxy that we have here. You'll note that I've also moved the carpet. $30 inside of an old gas tank. It's actually more than gasoline. Got the other one, pour it in there as well. But the nice thing about the Evaporated Rust is, unlike gasoline, it is reusable. And since it's about as much fun as watching paint dry for me to pour 2 more gallons in there, I'm going to do that off camera. And now, if I had the other 2 gallons in here, what I'll do is I'll put a cap on there, which is this here. This stuff is called Evaporated Rust, but if you let it sit, it will evaporate. These are just end caps for 2 1/4 posts. Looks like I'm going to have to get a larger one. This hole size is 2 1/4. These are 2 1/4 caps, but this is not quite big enough. I probably need like a 3-inch ideal clamp to go over this. It's okay, I've still got more to put in there. All right, nice thing is Jackson is running camera for me today, so I wanted to kind of go over something here. The reason I put it up on blocks like this is to have it in the Evaporated Rust at what fuel level would be on the tank. So where our perimeter is around here, this is all sitting like it would if the car was sitting on level ground. We're going to go ahead, like I said, I'm going to pull that back off, put a couple more gallons in there, and let it sit for a day. And then I'm going to start rolling the tank around to different positions. I'm going to roll it up on its side on either end, which is the reason why we do these caps like this, so it doesn't puke the Evaporated Rust down on the ground. Evaporated Rust is not going to hurt anything. It's biodegradable. Really clean product, which is another thing I like very, very well. Then when we're done with it, we'll use the drain that is on these early tanks to drain the Evaporated Rust back out of it into our containers so that we can reuse it on something else. So that's our show for this week. Do me a favor, folks. Be kind to each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on down the road. Jackson should have done most of this. I'm going to have some of you write in and say that. I needed him on camera. He's been asking a lot of questions, so you should be happy to know that he is learning. He's just not learning by doing. That's all. Not yet, he says, off camera. Because you can't hear him because you have a mic on. He's probably being picked up on mic 3, which is kind of suspect. Bye.